To bask or not to bask? You know, that's a surprisingly deep question for some of Australia's tiniest mammals. Today, we're going to uncover how two different marsupials came up with completely different answers to this fundamental question of survival.
So let's dive right in. I want you to picture an animal that weighs about as much as a single slice of bread. Got it? Okay, now imagine putting that tiny animal in the middle of the Australian outback, a place with crazy temperatures and not a lot of food. How in the world does something so small make it in an environment that harsh? Well, that's the puzzle we're going to solve today.
And here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the energy crises these little guys face. Then, we'll talk about their biological superpower for dealing with it. We'll check out the clever tests scientists designed, compare the pretty shocking results, and finally, we'll decode their two very, very different strategies for survival.
Okay, so for a small mammal, life is just this constant, high-stakes game of managing energy. I mean, every single calorie counts. One bad calculation can be fatal. Out in the Australian wilderness, having a solid energy-saving plan isn't just a nice-to-have. It is the only way you survive.
All right, let's meet our two main characters. Over on the left, we've got the red-tailed phascogale. It's a forest dweller, likes to climb trees. And on the right, we have the kultarr, a desert dweller that sticks to the ground. Now, they're pretty similar in size, but their worlds could not be more different. And that little detail, it's going to be central to this whole story.
So, how do they manage this incredibly tight energy budget? Well, it turns out a lot of these animals have this secret weapon, a kind of physiological superpower that kicks in when things get tough.
It's called torpor. And seriously, the best way to think about it is like your phone's ultra-low power mode, but for an animal. They basically just shut everything down. They deliberately drop their body temperature, slow their metabolism, their heart rate, everything. All to save as much precious energy as they possibly can. It's an amazing survival hack.
And the savings are huge. Torpor can slash an animal's daily energy use by half. But, and this is a big but, there's a major catch. Waking up from this state, getting your body all warmed up again, takes a ton of energy. It can actually burn through a huge chunk of the very energy they just worked so hard to save.
So this leads to the million-dollar question for the scientists. Is there a way to get a free warm-up? You know, is it possible to get all the benefits of torpor without paying that super high energy price to wake up? Well, a team of researchers decided they were going to find out.
And their solution was this brilliantly simple experiment they called the heat rock test.
The whole setup was actually pretty straightforward. They took both phascogales and kultarrs, put them in their own enclosures, and inside each one they placed a small artificially heated rock. And then they just watched. Using infrared cameras around the clock, they recorded everything, and they even withheld food sometimes, just to see how the animals would behave under a bit of stress.
The whole point was to answer one key question. Would the animals choose to bask? Would they actually lie on this warm rock and just soak up its heat? You know, get a totally free, passive warm-up instead of having to burn their own precious energy reserves to do it?
All right, let's get to the results, because this is where the story gets really interesting. Our two little marsupials had completely opposite reactions. And when I say the difference in their behavior was big, that is an understatement. It was absolutely staggering. Just take a look at this. This chart shows the longest single time each animal spent basking. The phascogale, it topped out at just under 5 minutes. Barely anything. But the kultarr, a whopping 154 minutes. We're talking more than 2.5 hours straight. This isn't just a slight preference. This is a completely different survival playbook.
And this table gives us even more detail on how they were so different. See, the phascogale was a strict creature of the night, only ever making these short little contacts with the rock. But the kultarr, it basically threw the nocturnal rulebook out the window, settling in for these long, deliberate basking sessions whenever it felt like it needed to.
And you don't have to take my word for it. The researchers themselves pointed this out right in their paper. They said the phascogales stuck to this strict nighttime routine, while the kultarrs would use that heat source at any time, day or night. This wasn't a fluke, it was a consistent strategy.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? Why on earth would two very similar animals adopt such wildly different strategies for staying alive? Well, the answer seems to lie in where they live.
This basically gives us two completely different survival personalities. You've got the phascogale, we can call it the strict night owl who just ignores the free heat and sticks rigidly to its schedule. Its full strategy is still kind of a mystery, to be honest. But then you have the kultarr, the flexible sunbather, who uses that heat rock like it's the most important tool in its entire toolkit, no matter what time of day it is. And when you stop and think about it, it makes perfect evolutionary sense, right? For the kultarr, living out in that harsh, food-scarce desert, the massive energy saved by basking is worth way more than the risk of being spotted by a predator during the day. It is a calculated gamble that is absolutely essential for its survival.
So let's just recap the big takeaways here. First, for the desert-dwelling kultarr, basking isn't optional, it is a vital survival tool. Second, the forest-dwelling phascogale has a different game plan, one we still don't fully understand. And this just reminds us that animal behavior is so precisely tuned to its environment. And finally, there's a practical lesson here. For these animals in captivity, a simple heat source isn't just a luxury, it's a critical part of their health and well-being.
This whole study was just a brilliant piece of detective work that revealed one of these hidden strategies. But it kind of leaves you with this bigger, more exciting question, doesn't it? If something as simple as lying on a warm rock is a life or death adaptation, what other incredible survival secrets are out there, hiding in plain sight, just waiting for us to notice?